Imagine waking up one day and realizing that the two people who mean the most to you, your parents, have vanished without a trace. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone. That's been my reality for as long as I can remember. But I haven't given up. In fact, I've made it my life's mission to find them, no matter what it takes. And I'm taking you with me on this wild journey across the globe, fueled by nothing more than a few scattered memories, cryptic clues, and the kindness of strangers. The search began on a quiet afternoon, sitting in my small apartment, staring at the few items I had left from my childhood, a faded photograph of my parents, a book they had once read to me, and a vague memory of a place I couldn't quite recall. The world suddenly felt both incredibly large and unbearably small. Where could they be? Why had they disappeared? These were the questions I had asked myself 1,000 times, but never had I felt more determined to find the answers. I had no address, no phone number, no clue where to start. All I had were a few snippets of conversations from when I was very young, conversations about places far from home, about dreams and plans they had. These fragments were the only roadmap I had. But I made a decision. I was going to follow these threads, no matter how thin or impossible they seemed. My first stop was Paris, a place I had always associated with my parents. Why? I wasn't sure. Something about the way they spoke of the city always stayed with me. It was my first leap into the unknown. As I wandered through the bustling streets, I stumbled upon a small cafe tucked away in a quiet alley. The owner, a kind old man with twinkling eyes, listened patiently as I explained my quest. To my surprise, he didn't think I was crazy. In fact, he seemed intrigued and offered me a story. Years ago, he had met a couple who sounded very much like my parents. They were travelers, dreamers, always on the move. But he hadn't seen them in years. Still, his recollections gave me a strange sense of hope. This was the first tangible connection I had to them. The cafe owner pointed me toward Italy, to a small town on the outskirts of Florence. He said that was where they had last mentioned going. So, I packed my bags and set off once again. Arriving in the small Italian town felt surreal. It was a place I had never been before, yet it felt really familiar. Wandering through the cobbled streets, I eventually found myself in front of an old stone house. The door creaked open, and an elderly man with a warm smile greeted me. He seemed to recognize me before I even spoke. "You look just like them," he said, his voice thick with emotion. It turned out he had known my parents well. They had stayed in his home years ago, looking for something, but he couldn't quite remember what. They had been kind, full of life, but also restless, like they were searching for something themselves. His story, though vague, was a comfort. My parents had been here, and they had been okay. But he didn't know where they went next. However, he did mention something strange, an old postcard they had left behind with a cryptic message, something about following the path to the rising sun. Could it mean Japan? With little more than the cryptic postcard in hand, I boarded a plane to Tokyo. It was a city that overwhelmed the senses, bright lights, crowded streets, and a language I barely understood. But I was undeterred. I had come too far to give up now. In Tokyo, I found myself aboard a crowded bus late one night, heading to the outskirts of the city. That's when I saw it, another clue. On the back of a seat, scratched into the paint, was a message. It was in English, which stood out like a beacon: "Keep searching. They are close." It was vague, yes, but it felt like a direct message to me, as if someone knew I was looking. The trail was cold, but I was sure my parents had left this message. They had to be close. I followed that message to a remote village outside of Tokyo, a place few tourists ventured. There, I met a family who claimed to have seen a couple resembling my parents not too long ago. The mother of the family spoke of a quiet man and a thoughtful woman who had stayed with them briefly. They were seeking something but didn't stay long enough to explain what. The family didn't know where they went next, but they gave me a name of a small, remote island in the Indian Ocean where travelers seeking answers often went. From Japan, I journeyed to India, where my parents had supposedly been seen. This part of the journey was not just physical but deeply spiritual. India, with its vast landscapes and ancient cultures, seemed like the perfect place to reflect and search within. I made my way to a tiny village in the foothills of the Himalayas, following the advice of a traveler I had met in Delhi. He had heard stories of a couple who had stayed in the village seeking a spiritual guide, a guru, who might hold the answers they were looking for. Meeting the guru was a turning point. He didn't have direct information about my parents, but he gave me something even more valuable, a sense of inner peace. "They are seeking something beyond this world," he said cryptically. "And so are you." His words made me realize that this journey was not only about finding my parents, but also about understanding myself. Just when I thought the trail had gone cold, I received a message from an old friend of my parents who was living in Buenos Aires. He had found something that he believed belonged to them, a book with an inscription that matched one my parents had written for me when I was a child. In Buenos Aires, I discovered the book in a dusty old bookstore, just as my friend had described. Inside, there was a note, "For our child, who will one day understand." It was their handwriting, unmistakable. But what did they mean? The book seemed to hold more than just sentimental value. It was filled with notes and messages in the margins, pointing to places, ideas, and memories that I had long forgotten. Each note felt like a breadcrumb, leading me closer to their trail. In the end, this journey became about more than just finding my parents. It became about discovering myself, my resilience, and the unexpected kindness of strangers. The clues, the encounters, the places I visited, they all shaped me in ways I could never have imagined. And while I haven't yet found my parents, I now know that the journey isn't over. Every new lead, every kind stranger, every clue brings me closer. And even if I never find them, the journey has been worth it for the incredible experiences and growth I've gained along the way. So, if you were in my shoes, would you keep searching? What would you do to find the people you love? Let me know in the comments below. And if you're looking for more stories of hope, resilience, and adventure, make sure to subscribe.